Okay.
Good morning and very early good morning to you, Kathy. I'm so grateful that you're here
Thank you. It's
this
such a
morning.
pleasure to be here. I think
Oh,
we're both in
great.
the same time zone too.
I'm in Mountain Time in Idaho. Actually the sun's coming up. Are you in Pacific Time?
I am. I am a
Okay.
little bit behind you, but I'll catch up before the
Okay.
day's
Yes, you
over.
will. I'm sure you will. Run past me in time. Yes. So Kathy, we've known each other for quite a long time in many forms, and it's just a privilege to know you and to have you be willing to be here today to share your mother of son wisdom. If you can share the state that you're hailing from.
California. So
California.
currently in California,
Yes,
yes, I am.
absolutely. And your son's ages?
I have my oldest son, Michael Patrick, is 31. And then, yes, he'll be 31 next month. And then my youngest is 28.
Okay.
And that's James.
Yes. And wow. Okay, so we're just going to launch into a similar idea that I stumbled upon probably a decade ago that really inspired me to start this conversation and know the value of looking at deeply mothers and sons relationship. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anything that comes up, just this is an open door, open space for that wisdom.
I appreciate that. I appreciate
So
that.
excited.
Yeah.
So the idea is that what sons hear and feel from their mothers about men and maleness contributes to the man they will become. I can repeat it if you'd like.
Mm, Well, no, I thank you for that. And I thank you for the revelation through the course of this interview rather than a preset dialogue because it's interesting. As I said, I stated the ages are 31 and 28. So I can be retrospective and looking at what I've shared and what I witness over the years. And and I would have to say that the unconditional love has been the permeating factor. And I say that because a lot of forgiveness has had to been given me for things that I've applied to them that weren't true.
Mm.
That so things like times that I'd come home hoping that they'd know better, right? There
No
was
better
that
about,
whatever.
for
So
instance.
I would bring anger into the doorway about
Mm.
my unmet expectations of my
Mm.
sons
Mm.
at the age of 3, at the age of 7, at the
So
age of
like you
12.
expected them to have their room clean. I don't know, like those kind of
Yeah,
things or.
expected them to have their behavior better, their room clean,
Mhm.
but all the time having expectations, but not really forming agreements with them. So as a mother,
Mhm.
I would have a sense of entitled authority,
Mhm.
and and I would apply that in the form of rules and metrics, right? You
Mhm.
need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. Never really knowing them until I got to know them.
Mhm.
Does that
And
make sense?
yes, and Kathy, do you think that your way of being, that there's something tied together with this idea that sons get their sense of maleness and ideas about being a man from their mother's feelings and thoughts and ideas about men and maleness? And
Yes, yes, yes.
tell me
And I
about
mean,
that.
well, I do believe that I came in with a brokenness into motherhood. And a lot of my brokenness was around um, maybe relationships that didn't work with other men, right? So there was this sense that I
Mm.
was going to make my sons better by
Oh.
by the standards that I would lay on them.
Mm. From the
But
experiences that you had with
in the
men
past,
previously,
yes,
the standards were created,
right.
and then okay.
Based on somebody else's rule book, right?
Mm.
And so trying to make them behave when they had more energy than the room applied for, right? So trying to make them smaller so that I'd look better, which was a a gift. Unfortunately, my parents passed on to me, be seen and not heard, be quiet, don't bring unwanted attention to yourself. So trying to contain my sons in order for me to control an environment. So it really wasn't so much about my sons as much as it was about me and my not knowing how to parent them, because my idea of parenting was control. So when I say that I learned as I went, the more that my boys rebelled against me, the more I saw the insanity of my behavior and the beauty of who they were as individuals. So as they grew up, I was able to see that maybe what I needed to do less of was trying to control their energy as much as to get to know their hearts and their energy. And I had that connection. So much of my early parenting of my sons was about making them more and then fill in the blanks, um, more quiet, more conforming. And that wasn't because of them, that was because of my inability to see their strength and their energy as part of their divine nature. Right? I had never had boys before. So I say that because that was all part of the journey of me learning to speak more authentically to them. So I had to have my own breakthroughs as a mother of sons. I didn't read the book first. I
If
had
there
to,
was a book.
yeah, I had to write my own pages with them. And I had a lot of unmet expectations. So I talk about the unmet expectations prior to having sons. And then I had a lot with their father. So my anger was simmering underneath it all. And
Where's that
pray
anger come from, Kathy?
that they weren't living up to my expectations.
I mean, prior to that, like prior to having the boys, prior to being married.
Heartbreak, misunderstanding of the dynamics, not taking responsibility for how I was showing up in the world, thinking that thinking that a man was, and then fill in the blanks and what they were supposed to be. But who I met were just humans, you know, just imperfect humans that were just like me. And so even though I waited, I was 30 years old when I started my family, even though 35 actually, even though I waited and waited, thinking that somehow that my maturity and my adulthood was going to be the perfect starting place to have a family, I learned that I still needed to learn all the lessons that I would have if I would have started at 18. Right? How to coexist, how to co-parent, how to blend, how to hear somebody over my own thinking, how the difference between discipline and punishment, um, how to love them for who they are, not for what I wanted them to be. So there was a great deal of, it was probably harder because I waited so long because I thought I was so darn smart than it would have been if I would have humbled myself and just entered into parenthood with an open heart and an open mind. So my boys taught me about parts of myself that needed to come to the light and heal. And as that came to the light, I was a better light on their path.
Beautiful. So, along with that, what do you think they heard or felt from you about, your beliefs and thoughts about men and maleness?
Well, being a dominating woman, I I was a bit, I don't want to say demasculating, but I didn't honor what they were. I thought it was something for me to manage. And all this is just coming to me now.
They
And
who, I want
so
to be clear,
my
Kathy.
sons,
Okay.
that I was trying to manage them.
Mhm.
And then at one point, probably early on before they entered their teen years, I fell in love with them as the other.
Mm.
And
Mm.
then I saw their otherness from me, which was a respect of them as an individual,
Mm.
a respect for their likes, a respect for their um, differences, a
Mm.
respect for their joys that they wanted to have, a
Mhm.
respect in the difference in the way they socialize and the way their energy pulsated through their body.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so as they got older and they separated from me a little bit more, I was able to, in that, respect the difference. And I
Mhm.
know we're talking mother of sons here, but my two boys are bookends to my daughter. So in the middle, I had this mini me that I look at how I needed to grow up and learn how to be a mother of individuals who had different needs.
Mm. Mm. So, wow. Um, there's a cartoon that really stimulated me to start this conversation 10 years ago. Was that there's a mother and her son standing in front of him, and he's got donkey ears and a donkey tail, and she has just said to him, "Your father was a jackass."
Mhm.
Wonder what
You know,
that
it's,
stimulates within you.
yeah, I I got a divorce after 21 years when my children were, my oldest was graduating from high school and my youngest, so Michael was, so in 2012 he graduated from high school, and then 2015 James graduated from high school. So my my dissatisfaction with my marriage, I knew could never be weaponized against my boys. So the idea of you're just like your father was something I needed to heal inside of me, because I didn't want to apply that rule of thinking to anybody,
So
right?
you were consciously
Oh, very
making that
conscious of
choice.
that. The very conscious of that, because they weren't like anybody. If I was going to learn, I learned by learning to love their otherness early on in their relationship. I knew I couldn't apply historical data to their future outcome,
Mhm.
that they needed to self discover and self express.
So how did you do that with, let's say specifically, um, how did you portray their father? You know, like you've made this decision to not, let's say, cut him
Well,
down or, you know, portray
I
him
had to
negatively.
I had to take responsibility um, for my side of it, and I also had to quit covering up for him.
Mm.
So there was a great deal of responsibility that needed to be taken, and much of my behavior, and I thought it was out of love, but really it was out of judgment, was I would run around fixing things, fixing people, fixing situations, fixing things so that
Mm.
it could be projected properly. So I used a great deal of my energy in the marriage at that time
Mm.
to constantly exhaust, and I was exhausting myself, you know, fixing things that he no longer wanted to take care of. And so I poured myself into my boys and my daughter, but mostly my boys, because here's the thing, they were fun. They were in football, they had activities, so they were fun. They were the other. Where my
Mm.
daughter and I were clashing. It's just, it's such an interesting skit. Life is such an interesting portrayal of human nature. And so um and all these little episodes, I had great opportunities to self-correct. Just like, oh, that's not working. Um, and so with the boys, I would be their biggest fan. Even to this day, they knew that I was their biggest fan. And a lot of it was escapism from the marriage and the house. right?
Mhm.
So we'd go and we'd do all kinds of sporting events and everything up and down the state. Um, very involved in that. My daughter would tag along and we would have fun. So there was that aspect of me being their fans, me being their friend,
Mhm.
and their father playing a different role other than that.
Mhm.
Um,
So what did you tell them, or what did they hear or feel from you about men, their father, maleness? Do you remember being like conscious of
mhm,
the
mhm.
words you used, or and what were they? If so.
Well, at one point in the when I announced that I'd be leaving their father, my oldest said, "Who's going to take care of Dad now? I hope you don't think I am." And I said, "I think it's time he took care of himself." And so there was this sense of, sometimes empowerment feels like abandonment. And so there was this sense of where, because I wasn't willing to play the game that I had orchestrated myself any longer, there was an implosion of
Mhm.
those norms. And all I could do was walk with them through that.
Mhm.
So I ended up moving out of the family home into a one-bedroom apartment. Um, Michael went off for the summer to work with a friend up at his camp in Ukiah. So you know where he went. So he was up in Camp Navarro
Mhm.
working, doing all this heavy lifting to try to get over his misery. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment. I slept on a futon in the front, and the kids would come in and out and stay there. And it was just like, yeah, I know it's tough. I mean, I had no answers about a future, and I
Mhm.
wasn't trying to hold it all together anymore.
Mhm.
But I had dignity and I had love.
Mhm.
And so it just started showing up in different ways. A lot of healing happened. Both my daughter and I are very strong. Um, we came together on another level. My son's individuated to a degree. Um, and then, we're all probably much more of a family now
Mhm.
as young adults than we would have been before. But my messaging has always been one of love, um, and respect and forgiveness.
Mhm.
I've had
So
to, yeah,
just
I've
specifically, you spoke respectfully and
yes,
honoringly of their father and men in
yes,
general,
yes,
knowing
uh,
that that was important for them as
yes,
men
yes,
to hear.
and then
Mhm.
held myself up in high esteem as well. And
Mhm.
finding my own balance in all of this to
Your
be
your own what? What's the word
my
you
own
used?
balance, my own
Balance.
sense of balance in on all of this, because it was probably most disruptive to me in the physical, me moving out, packing two suitcases and
Mhm.
leaving, but finding the way through that. And it's funny, my sister once said, she goes, people, she was going through a hard time with her husband at one time, many, many years ago, but they reconciled. But what she said is, nobody understands how I can do it with my children. I couldn't do it without my children.
Right.
And even that, I realized, I mean, you had so much dignity in your uncoupling, and
Mhm.
I was so much more enmeshed in um, Catholic cultural um, obligations that needed to be met, social obligations that were entwined around a promise that I was willing to keep, even at the cost of my happiness.
Yeah.
There were so many, there was so much barbed wire wrapped up around that relationship that untangling that, uncoupling that was made me very fragile.
Yeah.
And what I knew I couldn't be with that fragility is angry and fragile. I needed to I needed to just let the healing occur. And so I was good to myself, good to my children, good to their father, um, and
Mhm.
still had to find myself in all that. Right? Never really be the doormat, but just kind of step aside for a little bit.
Mhm.
And so being a mother of sons has given me the opportunity to kind of be vast and varied in my approach. Am I a feminist? Probably. Do I combat misogyny at every chance? Did I raise my boys to understand that their physicality is one that is stronger than a woman of their same stature? And so therefore that's a contribution and not a sense of domination? Oh yeah.
Mm.
Oh yeah, we have that conversation.
Mhm.
That your physicality is not an absence of your compassion, but it's with that. And that your kindness is never to be weaponized in manipulation. So, and as much as I've said that, I've tried to model it as well too,
Mhm.
trusting that their own filter systems at this stage will take it in.
Mm. Mm. So, given your precipice, I just picture with this, mother of, adult sons. When you look at, do they ever talk about being a man or what it's like to be masculine or a man in the world, or
Yes,
do
yes.
they?
And they also talk about their heart. They have unbelievable vocabulary about the way they're feeling. I
Mhm.
mean, I can ask either one of my sons, well, how does that make you feel? And they can articulate their feelings.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that that is a gift that continues to show itself.
Mhm.
Or they'll say, Mom, I don't feel like talking about that yet.
Mhm.
And then depending on the need, on the need of it's like, well, you can't hide. So when will you feel like talking about it?
Mhm.
So, because there's also this opportunity of me going back to my old behavior, which is making things easier for them and interpreting it for them and being their mouthpiece, right? Which is what I did with their father, which is
Mhm.
what I've learned to do with, yeah. So I don't let them defer or dismiss. Their participation is necessary.
Mhm.
Where before I used to let myself be an interpreter for other
Mhm.
people,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Where I fill in the blanks of their life.
Mhm. Well, I
That's not
appreciate
allowed anymore.
I appreciate your candid honesty, fresh.
Yeah.
Wow. So, is there anything else that you'd like to share just about that
Well, I
idea of,
many
just.
years ago, I went to a seminar called Dare to Be a Woman. And it was probably 2010 at Jackie's,
Mm,
first time I
mm,
met Lady D. And I showed up with a baseball cap and a sweatshirt and jeans after I'd just come from a basketball tournament into this environment. And there was this false bravado that I thought I needed to project to be the type of woman that I wanted to be in the world. And the unraveling of that false bravado has brought about more authenticity in my relationships with my sons than when I was trying to be something that I thought they wanted me to be.
mm,
So when I became more of who I was in the relationship rather than who I thought I had to be or who I thought I had to model, when I became more of a woman, when I became more curious than commanding, when I became more open than rigid, when I became softer rather than tougher, I created a better space for my children to be themselves, which automatically, through a design greater than anything I couldn't master, their authenticity came out. So I think the mother of sons is, for me, had a huge turn when I became clear on who I was in the equation, not who they needed to be.
mm.
And so
Yes.
there's that
Yes.
allowance once more,
Yes.
letting
Wow.
allowing that to come through.
What a beautiful wrap up. So grateful. Thank you for being here, my dear, sharing your
Thank you.
heart.
Thank you
So
for being so
appreciate you.
true to your calling.
Aw,
Oh, this needs to
thank
be
you.
had.
This needs to
So
be had.
thank
Thank
you,
you,
thank you,
Kathy, so
thank you.
much. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.